Welcome, welcome, welcome. I need to say welcome in the chat just in case we have people strolling in here. Everything looks good. Well, it has been a busy past several days, and I wanted to start by talking about it a little bit, but first, a sip of this sugar-free soda. 0 calories, because when you're sitting for hours in coding or gaming, why do you need the calories, really? So I went to Pennsylvania. Hang on, my chair is a little bit low. There we go. Adjustment. Went to Pennsylvania, went to Too Many Games. It's a gaming convention out there. Hung out with Nathaniel Bandy and Indy Jacob. Two of what I would consider to be good friends, and they are also, you may know them as their YouTube selves, and it was a blast. I had a really great time out there, and we made sure to get in a game of Monopoly. Now, one thing we intend to do, I think at some point in the future, I don't want to speak for them, but we have discussed it before, is we need to get a live game of Monopoly between the three of us, because there are really interesting things that happen conversation-wise when we play Monopoly. One thing that happens during Monopoly that never used to happen during the Digicast, which is a podcast we used to do together back in 2017, we were pretty nice to each other on that podcast. But when we play Monopoly, there's times when we're cursing each other out, and it's great. So anyway, there were a lot of takeaways from going to that convention. You know, most people that go to a gaming convention, they get a lot of things out of it that are related to games. And I didn't get much out of it in relation to games, but it turns out that the valuable part for me was basically spending time with them, spending time with lots of YouTubers, and getting sort of an eye-opening view into that world that I did not really have before. That was really the big valuable part for me, and it really gave me some perspective on where to go next. And what I mean by that is I've gone a lot of different directions over time, and I think that it's time to gain some additional focus. So what I did almost as soon as I got back is I began on Twitter going through and unfollowing hundreds of accounts. So my Twitter account had more than 1,800 profiles that I was following. And this is just something that happened as it kind of built up over time, and profiles that have to do with all kinds of different subject areas. You know, it's my personal profile, and if I found an account interesting, I would follow it pretty liberally. And so I decided to change that, and to really instead become more focused with what I think I would really like to do, and that is to do what I set out to do many years ago now, back in 2015, and that's make games. And I want to get a lot more of my mental processes focused toward that end, and really only spend most of my time interacting with people who are kind of in that space, and really just, you know, start living and breathing the industry again in a way that I haven't done in a long time. And there have been a lot of distractions in terms of what Elega Corp has been up to. And for those who wonder, Elega Corp is not always just me, although obviously I am the main person behind it. I'm the owner and so on, and I work most of the hours. But, you know, I like to think of Elega Corp as the contractors who have worked on my projects here, and artists, and you know, I was working with Indy Jacob for a time to do video editing and things like that. I've produced Pluralsight courses, which you know about as well. And those are all good things. Those are all good projects, and I still am under the belief, my original belief, that it is a safe and effective choice to have a lot of diversification in what I do and what my company does. And working on online education courses is a great choice. And it has been more rewarding than I expected. On the Elega Corp blog, which that is a perfect segue, I'll go ahead and transition to the Elega Corp website, which of course I like to start off every stream with. At elegacorp.com, there is the recent blog posts, and of course you can also just use the blog navigation option up there at the top. But on the blog, I've talked a lot about the future direction of the company. And one of the things I talked about was learning a lot more about low-level sort of computer architecture and hardware and computer science fundamentals, things that a lot of companies, I would argue, have really begun to leave behind in some ugly ways. Things have begun to get a lot more abstracted. And if you read this post called The Future of Elega Corporation here on the site, I talk a lot about that. And, we have the web is cluttered with hundreds of JavaScript frameworks, and not a single one of them is ever good enough for whatever it is that someone is doing, and libraries continue to grow, dependencies continue to spiral out of control. Things are becoming very bloated. And so there's a lot of different areas I've just touched on, just describing all of this. And so part of the question with the recent experience at the convention and with everything that I've written about and all the things that I've done so far, it leads to the question of, okay, what do I do? What do I do with all this information? And what is coming next? And it's a great question. And I think I have some ideas. In fact, I've probably had a heavier flood of creative ideas and inspiration the past few weeks than I've had in probably the entire year prior combined. And I'm still sorting it out. I'm still trying to figure out what to do. There are projects that are in motion that still make a lot of sense, and there are things about the future that I think I was imagining I would do, and things that I think make a lot of rational, practical sense. And I guess the big thing about this trip that has really gotten me thinking is I've begun to ask, are those things really so rational? Do those things make as much sense as I think they've made? Am I going to be happy doing all of those things? Part of me says yes. The other part of me says, you know what? Every time that I have dug very deeply into a certain area, I have gotten a lot of rewarding things out of it that I really never expected whenever I go super deep into something at length. And there's a lot of examples of this. I went to high school and said to myself, you know what? Coding doesn't make a lot of sense. This is what I said at the time. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's overly competitive. It's boring. I really don't feel like I'm accomplishing much whenever I sit down and try to do this. But then later, several years later, all of that changed for me. And now that is what I do almost every single day. And I do it because there are amazing things that can be done with code. I do it, the way I always have described it in recent time is, for me, coding is not ever about the code. It's about what you can do with the code. And that's still true. But my point being that I really didn't expect when I first began going down that path what it would lead to. And anyway, I think emotionally I would like to do a lot more with games. And I think that's always been the case. But I've always hesitated to jump in a deeper way. And anyway, so I have some thinking to do in that area. Kalling Kingdom has made a lot of progress, and I would like to begin getting into it now. I'm now working on the pre-alpha, what I'm calling version 0.17. And we have not gotten as far as I would like. We're now at the end of June. and I'm feeling a little behind. So in case you're unfamiliar with this, this is a fantasy theme, turn-based city simulation game where you basically build a city and you face a number of decisions along the way. And you also deal with the world market. And the decisions you face are things like there's a starving traveler who's come across your town requesting aid. Do you help them? If you do, they could be a security risk. Or there may be a situation such as monsters are attacking. How would you like to defend the town? So it attempts to demonstrate some things that come about halfway toward realism, and then the other half remains in fantasy. And because it's turn-based, it is meant to be a game that you take at your own pace, where you carefully consider all of the information at hand, and then you progress through it as you desire. Let me go ahead and dig into a few features here, and I'll show you some progress that's been made. I worked on this a little bit at the hotel, and I continued working on it off live stream as well. I'm going to get into some of the features, but before I do, I just want to say too that there is a role that Kalling Kingdom plays in these larger plans I was just talking about at the beginning of the stream. The first project that I really began on in earnest in 2015 was a game called Age of Nomads. It was a real-time strategy game. And that game, I recently decided to start over on because I just feel that looking at things now, I can do everything that I did better than how it was done and how it was in the progress of being done. And there was so much that I had done so far on there that could be done better. I decided I would just hit the reset button. Kalling Kingdom, on the other hand, being a turn-based game that's kind of a strategy game, but I really like to consider more so a simulation game. This is meant to be a smaller scale project that I crank out inside of a shorter time span. But as I've gotten into it, the more I like it and the more I feel like there's a lot of things that can be done with it. So anyway, let me hit play here on the editor. And I'm here on the title screen. Let me also make sure that the audio is at a decent level right now. So what has gotten done in the past week? Well, let me start a new game, and I'll show you. So a lot of you are familiar, if you've been watching the previous streams, with this blank canvas that we begin with. And I can go into this build menu and I can build stuff, and there's just placeholder sprites right now for everything. Even the farm, there's something different here for the farm, but that's really unfinished, and that's really a placeholder as well. Up here I have basically like the market tab, and I also plan to add an expenses view into this so that you can see what money is being spent and what it's being spent on for the town's expenses. But this is really like a lot more like the stock market, and you can invest money into here, and then you can expect to see some rate of return over time. I'll close that. You can also offer other people that exist around the kingdom cash to come to the town. Usually 80 gets the job done in this particular build. I can close this out, and then when you build stuff, you can basically drag the sprite around the canvas. And if you go too close to the screen's edge, it restricts you from building. So there's no like scrolling over, the way that you may have seen in a lot of other games. This is extremely simple. This space you see on this one screen, that is what you have to work with. That's it. So I can place this down, and then I can, name this something. I'll name this I'll just name this mini horses. I don't know, whatever. Okay. So, and then what we have is we place down these businesses, and there's income per turn, there's an owner, or currently there isn't one, right? And you can have a certain number of workers against the maximum. And what you have to do is you have to match up workers to the business. If you've seen previous streams, you know this is the case. And this whole screen here needs to change. So one of the major things that I want to work on this evening and in the coming days is this needs to go away, basically. It needs to become way more intuitive to take workers and, oh, that's a little display bug right there. Take workers and match them up with businesses. So as you can see, there's this. This is new. This is something I worked on getting in, and what it basically tells you is it tells you how many people are at the business, as well as the amount of income that the business is projected to bring in. And at the moment, there's a bug where it hangs around right here. I do have a way that I'll be able to fix that, but can't fix it right now, unfortunately, while I'm still playing. But you can basically see that, okay, this is the name that I named it. I'm going to give players the ability to rename the business. Gosh, that's really annoying that that's sitting there. There's, of course, the type that it is. It's stable. It earns 5 income per turn. We now see that it's owned by someone, and there's one person working there. Makes sense. Now, you may also notice that this is showing a amount of 2 on the amount of income that it's bringing in there on the right where it says 2K. And the reason for that is because of the condition of the market. So the market condition affects how much the business actually brings in. The income per turn is 5, but the tax revenue that you bring in relative to the market value is 2K. So the income you actually receive in relation to running the town is 2K. And that needs to be made more apparent to the player here as well. So, you know, I guess the big sort of overarching idea is I've had a number of people play this, and the way that they typically go through the experience of the game is they kind of attempt to build out a bunch of stuff. They end up losing really fast because they typically will just try to throw down buildings really quickly, and they go broke like really quick. It's generally the way that it happens. And I don't know if that's really a problem, because the market is meant to play a significant role, and the idea is that you're supposed to build out very slowly and very carefully. Let me begin advancing through turns as well, because I did begin on sort of advancing through building out the city event system. And I'll explain what that is here in a second. But in the meantime, when you go to next turn, it of course gives you this summary since the last turn. There's more things that need to be added here as well. And I would say in general, there's just a lot more information needs to be displayed to the player. So I'll hit next turn again. And eventually, as I advance, by the way, if I go to the market tab, you can see that the rate of return is shifting and money is coming in based on the investment. But I'll keep going through this, and eventually we should hit an event. And the longer I work on building stuff out, I have to sell a little bit to stay afloat. Hang on. Losing money as I go through the turns. But eventually, you know, we'll have a lot more events. So here's the starving traveler scenario that I mentioned. And you can choose to basically offer this person aid or turn them away. If you turn them away, there's consequences. And if you provide aid, there's also consequences. It's really up to the player to decide how to handle that. For right now, just to continue on, I will choose to provide aid. And it says, the traveler was immensely grateful for your help. After recovering from their journey, they have chosen to press on to their original destination west of Trim. And the idea, of course, is that when you choose a particular outcome, it will not always end the same way. Sometimes different things will happen, especially based on certain conditions. And every event is able to handle things in a different way. So, another example of that is monster attacks, and I'm not sure if I can run into that again. It actually might be broken right now. Let me continue. Oh man, the rate of return is really good right now. Let me continue like selling to cover expenses and just see if I can advance through and get the monster attack to happen again. I don't think it will work because I think that there actually is a bug here that prevents it from occurring. Based on probability. Whoa! Okay, that's an ugly bug. I don't know what just happened there. I think I was accidentally able to click the button twice. Okay, so that's something to fix. So you know what? I do want to show you monster attacks. Let me see if I can fix that bug while I have you here. And at this point, you know, I'm far enough along in development that if you ever want to play this game, beware, because from here on out, we could be going into spoiler territory. You know, especially with the event system. The event system is... there's a lot that's going into it. And I'll actually show you a little bit of that. But let me see. Let me go to... so there's like a bunch of new classes that I wrote out, right? So there's one called City, City Event, City Effect, City Event Result, City Event Manager, and I even created an interface called iCityEvent. And this basically defines what has to happen when I'm defining an event that's taking place. And there's basically a structure here where the event is proposed to the player, and then each event has two possible decisions the player can make. And then sort of based on the world state at the time the decision is being made, that dictates kind of what can possibly happen as the player makes decisions. So if I go into the City Event Manager, which is responsible for kind of deciding what event gets thrown at the player when, there's an overall structure that happens. So the first thing is that there's kind of a random number, or just what I refer to as a dice roll, which of course it's not a dice roll, it's a floating point number, which basically means that it has a cajillion more possibilities than an actual die would have. But then we have a set of eligible events, which basically means based on the dice roll, there's a set of possible events that could happen based on the probability of those events. And that's basically just configured as each event is set up. And so the events are set up in data. So like down here, I have Aid Starving Traveler and Monster Attack. These are the first two that I've been working on. And you can see that there's a chance of the event happening. Like right now, currently the Monster Attack is set to 0.08. There's the Starving Traveler, which is 0.1. And so the idea is that from the dice roll, that gets compared to the chance of the event happening. And then of those events, some of those events are more likely to happen than others. And basically the idea that I said is, well, if a given event is more likely than the other to occur, then I want that one to happen. The problem with that logic is that that's why between these two, you're always going to get the Starving Traveler, basically. So to resolve this, I need to change a couple things. Because basically like the chance of the Starving Traveler is 0.1, the chance of the Monster Attack is 0.08. And so I think what would be more interesting in this case is if I were to make both of them equally likely to happen, but then we choose one also kind of at random. So I'll say if the eligible event, chance of event is greater than the top event, okay. So by the way, and just to walk through the code a little bit, the top event is basically like, that's our pick. That's our pick for the event that happens to the player potentially to decide what decision they're going to have to go through. And then we're iterating through and we're figuring out, okay, so how do we determine that? And basically, if it's more likely to happen, that becomes the pick. If they're equally likely to happen, then we're going to basically just take whatever was assigned first. And that, I think, needs to change. I also think it's potentially a problem the way that just this works right here, because what this is really saying is based on the dice roll, we're deciding a range of possible events that could happen based on some numbers. And anyway, I don't think that that's entirely coherent, so that probably has to be tweaked. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say that there needs to be some kind of a randomized sort of pick. And so I'm going to go into this. And I think I'm going to do an int, and this will be eligible event pick, and we're going to be choosing from the, it'll basically be an index to choose out of the eligible events. And so what I'll do is I'll say, I'll use like random range, random range, which I do here, Unity engine.random.range. And autocomplete is not really working fantastically well. This also returns a floating point, which isn't great. I'm actually going to convert this. Convert to int32. Oh, that's right. You know what? I remember this. We can't just feed floats. That's okay. Okay, so here's what I'll do instead. I'll say float, and I'm going to pick a number. I'll say eligible event, pick as float, unity.random.range, start at 0, and we will go to eligible events dot count. But of course I think count has to be cast as a float, something like that. I don't know, maybe that'll work. Unity engine.random.range. Then what we will do is we will convert the float to an int. And I'm not sure how I want to do that, but let me just see if I can just do this. Eligible event pick as float. Yeah, that might work. Maybe, but if there's like rounding things that are bothersome, that could be problematic. But hopefully it all works out with like typecasting. Eligible event pick. Then we need to say the top event is now eligible events at the index of the eligible event pick. And hopefully that will randomize things a bit, and then we can, I think from there we can actually break instead of continue. So let me change that to break. We can just break out of the loop. See a couple of you in chat. Welcome once again. Let me know if you have any questions while you're watching. I think it's probable that you folks missed the little spiel I gave at the beginning of the stream about the convention that I went to in Pennsylvania, which was pretty amazing. But if you want to listen to it, you can go back and watch the recording later, of course. Okay, so let me see if this compiles first. And this is basically what I was working on early in the week. I was working on the city events and this new little UI widget whenever you place down a stable, this little thing here. And just to show you, I can also place things down on the right, and if I do that, it will switch the side that it displays on based on where the business is on the screen. And I also had some fun times figuring out how to make sure that that's always on top, which is kind of a long story, but anyway. Okay, let's see if I can get some events happening. Some different events. I'll add a person. And match. Alright, there's a starving traveler. Next. And since there's just 2 events, it's, you know, a pretty good test to see. Oh, and I lost. Oh, because I ran out of money. Okay. Can't play my own game. You know what? I need to debug. I want to understand what gets picked and how it gets picked. So I'm going to do that. And I apologize if I'm like flipping through this really fast. Oh, there we go. So here's the 2 events, 2 city events. There's the monster attack. Okay. So what it does when it converts it to the int is it just throws it down here. Oh, you know what? I do see a problem that could happen with this. This really needs to say count -1. We don't want that going to well, we don't want it going to 2 when there's no index of 2, so it really needs to be count -1. Sorry, let me start over. That was not very elegant of a test. And when I say count -1, it takes like 7 seconds to compile or something like that. And there was a point where I wrote a test script that worked well to kind of run through a scenario. I used that whenever I was doing gameplay balance. I really could probably write a script for this just to see. Oh gosh, dang it. Okay, let me not run out of money this time. I get distracted trying to talk and play at the same time, and I'm trying to play really fast. Okay. But yeah, I was trying to say that, you know, I can write a test script that would give a okay, so this picks 0 eligible event. So the first eligible event, is that going to be a monster attack? It might be. Eligible events. This is set to, okay, 2 items. The first one's monster attack. So we should see monster attack pop up on the screen. Uh-oh. Oh, the breakpoint is still stopping it. Monsters are attacking! And listen to that music. It just says monsters are attacking. What should we do? Should we attempt defense? Or should we attempt surrender? Oh my gosh. That's fantastic. Alright, well, I'm going to say attempt defense. And the city was successfully saved from attack. Beautiful. So that's prototyped. And I think as I progress through now, we should see kind of a randomized pick between the 2 events. And then I can start throwing in more events to that system. And hopefully see more gameplay variety emerge. Okay, so there it is again. So I'm going to remove that breakpoint and just continue playing. Okay. Monster attack again, but that could just be chance, so let me keep going. And not run out of money in the process. We're at a negative rate of return, so I want to sell everything off in the market. And I can get everything out except one. By the way, this is a bug as well that I have to fix, where it shows that you have a current investment of 1, but then you can't sell it. And I think I know the reason for that. I think what's going on is there's actually a fraction of a bit of currency there, but it's displaying as an integer. So you can't actually take a whole integer out because you don't have an entire integer, if that makes sense. Okay, so I have a little bit of money. I'm going to build stable number 2. Get another person. Okay. Match them up. So now I have 2 businesses going on. And I'll get a farm going as well. Oh! Did not mean to click the animator tab. That was... okay. Alright, so that's person number 3, and you can see that this shows 0 until you match things up. And that was really, really needed, right? Like, this idea that you can place buildings down, and if it's pretty early on when you're playing, you think the building is going to be generating stuff. So this provides a quick way for the player to kind of just cycle over businesses and think through it and think, okay, well, how good is my cash flow really? You know, just kind of at a glance. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done to convey information to the player much better. So that's what we're here to do. Good lord. Okay. I'm going to 70. There we go. Alright. I guess I could go... I could probably throw down one more farm, but I don't want to risk it. So I'm just going to... Well, I think the market is going to be dipping negative a lot more, so I'm just going to try to ride it out. See if I can survive things, and hopefully we'll see Starving Traveler pop up instead of Monster Attack for one of these turns. We're at a full negative 10% rate of return on the market right now, which is also going to harm the businesses somewhat. Still getting only 4 in tax revenue, which is not enough to get positive. But the market's coming back up, so that's good. Yes, please defend. So one of the things about the monster attack, by the way, is that as the game progresses, the monster attacks will get more risky. Things are going to get more aggressive. And, oh gosh, that happened really fast. And that was just chance. Okay, so I need to start investing now that the market is positive again. Yeah, so as the game progresses, the idea is that the player really needs to be throwing more resources into military, and they need to have adapted their cash flow for that purpose to deal with monster attacks. Now, that's just monster attacks, right? Like with this event system, there's really the possibility of putting in dozens of different events, and that's, I think in an ideal world, you know, with enough time and enough balance testing and things like that, I think that's really what I would do with that sort of a system. Because I do really like where it's going. And this UI bit right here is just so... I like that so much better than not having it. I need more stuff like that so that you can just be much more informed as the player. But, you know, the trouble is I need to really tackle that sort of stuff as well as, you know, trying to balance getting graphics done, because I still need... I'm going to get 16 into the market. This is a really good rate of return. I don't know how long I'm going to have it. You know, I still need to get these 3D models done. I need to get these sprites finished. And I really need to start putting hours into that if I want to have any hope of releasing this in July. So I have to balance that with the ongoing progression of the gameplay systems. So that's the deal. That's the deal ahead. And we are just going to ride this market as long and as hard as we can. And I'm just going to keep throwing in 6. We're at 9%, which means we're probably on the way back down again, but I'm going to do what I can. And hopefully we'll get some additional capital to throw up more buildings. There are a lot of games where I've been able to do better than this one. Yeah, we're really losing the ROR. And there is still some balance that needs to be done. You know, kind of up until this point, the idea has been that with this event system, there are going to be additional opportunities to make cash, to aid in the cash flow, so that in addition to buildings and investment, you can thrive a lot better. Because I do want the player to be able to build everything by the end of the game, by the end of the 60 turns. Okay, so this is problematic. 2%. So I'm going to go ahead and take 300 out. Let's see if I can get... I'm just going to do one more farm. And get one more person. And as you can see, like, if you've been following this since almost the beginning, some of you have been, it's just more and more a game, you know, like, you basically see a lot more of me spending time with less like hammering out code and more like actually just playing the game. And that's probably a big part of it. Gosh, this is really troubling. The problem is with 2 events, I have no idea if it's like a coin toss or if I'm going to actually see the Starving Traveler scenario. I'm going to go ahead and pull out of the market. I really need to see the Starving Traveler happen. That's gotta happen. Come on. Maybe it's just not going to happen for some reason. There might be something about the numbers where it just doesn't happen. And we're going to be on turn 60 pretty soon. The market is dead right now. So is my tax revenue. And you know what? There is something wrong with the income numbers being displayed here. I really need to look into that and get that straight. That has to be fixed. Next. Next. Yeah, from a development perspective, there's a lot to balance here, so... I think I'm going to have to just write a test for this. I think that's the only way I'm going to be able to get a handle on this. That's end game right there. Well, it's a lot more interesting with that event system. If I can just get the event system to work, that is. But it's coming along. It's starting to take shape, I think. Alright, so what is the deal with this? What is going on here? Maybe what I can do to test this is have this return... So is this already... This is already returning a city event. So I think what I can do is get a test going. Let me go to the test game. And... I need like a totally different test. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have this enumerator, I'm going to say test city event randomization, because I need to see a nice variation of the two events occurring, and I need it to be relatively simple. You know, like without doing something stupid like saying, well, if this event happened like recently, like in a recent turn, then, you know, don't repeat it or whatever. So let me just do this. I'm just going to do like a number of shots. No, number of, yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter what I call this. I'm going to say 250. And I'm going to say number of monster attacks begins at 0. Number of starving traveler begins at 0 as well. And by the way, these two should not have an equal chance of happening. Nor should the other be completely overridden, I don't think, at this point, by just one of them being more likely to happen. I think the starving traveler bit should be a lot more rare, because that's going to be kind of thrown in with a bunch of other scenarios that can happen. And I don't want to spoil everything, so I'm not going to talk about all my ideas there, but so let me see how I can do this. I'm going to need the city event manager for this, which I can grab out of the game manager. So I is going to run while it's less than the number of shots, and it begins at 0. And I'm going to say city event, actually, I'll say city event manager is equal to game manager dot city event manager. And I'm going to have this run, so I need a yield return null inside here. Otherwise, everything will freeze and crash. And I'm going to say city event. I'll just call it city event. City event manager dot what is it called? It has a name. What is it called? Calculate events. Calculate events. Yes. Calculate events. And I'm going to say if city event dot event name is equal to monster attack, then we are going to increment number of monster attacks. Else if city event name is starving traveler, I think that's the name, right? I believe that's the name. Starving traveler, yes. Starving traveler, then increment starving traveler. Yep. And at the end of it, we will print number of monster attacks and number of starving traveler. And this way I can test it over and over again. And what I'm worried about is that one will happen completely instead of the other, even with the code change that I made to try and make sure that's not the case, sadly. If any of you in chat have suggestions for me as to how to better do this pseudo-randomization, feel free to call them out, but let's see. Oh yes, and to run this, I need to do one more thing, which is to go into the game scene and flip on the test game. In fact, that may be all I need to do. I don't know if it'll crash from the sound manager. It might. Let me see. Yeah, it basically crashed. That's okay. I'll just switch back to the main menu scene and go from there. But now test game is on, and so it should run through the game basically automatically when the scene loads. And I do not have a print statement. Oh, you know what I forgot? I always forget something, don't I? Let me run the coroutine. That would help. That would help. Yeah, we're going to do that instead of the other one. Okay. And yes, I did get a game over statement in the log, which makes sense. Object reference. I don't get a city event back. Does it not initialize in time? It probably doesn't initialize in time. I have a really dumb idea. I'm going to yield return new, wait for seconds, and I'm just going to throw in like 5 whole seconds. Probably a really dumb way to solve the problem, but it should work. And hey, everyone has 5 seconds to wait, right? Everyone does. Okay. And it still crashes. That's unfortunate. Oh, okay, fine. Just tell me why. Tell me why you crash. It's gonna be something dumb. I just know it. It's gonna be something dumb I forgot. Alright, what happened? It's null. City event is null. Oh! Actually, no, that does make sense, because you have a dice roll, and a lot of turns you will not have an event happen. That's good to think about, actually. So if city event is not null, then we can do this other stuff. That's okay. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. So we'll go with that. And in fact, I might not need the 5 seconds in there. Probably don't, actually. We'll find out soon enough, that's for sure. Unity may just know the magical order of operations to initialize stuff to avoid that problem. Okay. And that is what I was afraid of. Number of monster attacks, 20. Number of starving travelers, 0. Why? Why does that happen? Here, I bet if I try it again, it'll be exactly the same. Let's try it again. Although we may get a different number of monster attacks. But let's see. Okay, 14 monster attacks. What in the world? So there's some problem with how I told it to do this range thing here. So let's see. I probably need to do like a rounding thing or something. Oh God. Because there's only 2 that count -1, we'll just go to 1. And then it just takes off the decimal values and goes to 0. That is why. That's why. Okay. So we need to round. Gosh, dang it. I should have thought of that. Let's see if we can get like a good round function that's already in the, yeah, math F, round. Okay. All right. Let's do that. Int, let me do math F dot round. Hey, round to int. My God, look at how convenient that is. Eligible event pick is float. Yes, please. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's try this again. I bet it works. I bet it works now. There we go. Number of monster attacks 10. Number of starving traveler 6. Let's run it again. We'll get different numbers this time. Although it's interesting to know, like, what are going to be the distributions, right? Like, 14 monster attacks, 12 starving traveler. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. Ten monster attacks, 8 starving traveler. You notice it's still doing more monster attacks than starving traveler. Isn't that weird? I wonder why that is. I wonder if that's just a statistical, like, sort of not of significance. 7 monster attacks, 6 starving traveler. And it looks like some games we just get more event occurrences than others. Which, like, almost makes me think maybe I should just be adjusting the range. 19 monster attacks, 8 starving traveler. 19 monster attacks. Good Lord. Let's crank this up. Let me crank this up to instead of 250, I'll go to 500. Just more iterations. Not that that makes a difference statistically, but I just want to see more numbers, really. Bigger numbers. Okay, aha! Okay, 14 monster attacks, 17 starving traveler. So maybe, once we statistically kind of throw this thing outward... You know what? I don't need to be repeating this every time. I can put this all into a loop, and I'm going to say number of sets, and I'm just going to do 1,000 of these. Ooh, you know, that's a lot. I don't want to do that. Let's just up this number. Let me up this to like 10,000. We're going to find out how well the code performs today. Okay. It does feel slow, I have to say. But that's okay. It is turn-based, after all. Yeah, 10,000 takes a lot more time. It'll probably be really big numbers. Wow. I feel like it should be faster than this. This is like really slow. Is it even running? I don't even know if it's running. Is it running? course, I've been sitting here for like 3 seconds, and I'm like, it's slow. No, this is slow. I don't know what's going on. What's this warning message I got here? Okay, something about mono behavior, something. I don't care. Well, it's running as a coroutine, so depending on how Unity handles the coroutine, see the GPU frame rate is still over 200 frames a second. I don't know. I have no idea if it's even running at this point. It should come back. Like any second now. Okay, it may be broken. It may be broken. I'm going to give it a minute. You really shouldn't have this much trouble. Really should not have this much of an issue. Okay. Oh my goodness. Did I break everything? Is there something I've missed? Wow. I have no idea if it's running or not. Did I break it by going to 10,000? I shouldn't. Oh, it finally came back. Okay, 422 monster attacks, 401 starving traveler out of 10,000 basically like turn iterations. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that monster attacks still happen more often, which whatever. I guess it's fine. I feel like there's a lot about the numbers that I need to adjust. I still think I need a better way of kind of sorting through what event happens. And I think once I add more events, it'll make a lot more sense in terms of, you know what, like the player should be able to expect a wide bit of variety. And by the way, remember too that for any given event, based on where you are in the game or based on what conditions are in the game, that can influence what happens based on a given decision. So in other words, like with monster attacks, like I said earlier, for example, if you're farther into the game, the event basically cares about how much combination of like what is your population, how much are you putting into military spending, and maybe I'll have it consider a few other things. And a lot of the events are basically going to be like that, where they care about what is game state or what is player state, what has the player decided to do previously that has maybe impacted how well they're going to be able to handle a given decision, and things like that. Or some things will cost money. So like to aid the starving traveler, for example, that costs 10 like out of the gate. But maybe I could tweak that event to say, you know, at other times there will be like a variation in how much it costs to actually help them and things like that. And then as I add in other events, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of influences the game and so on. But I'll go ahead and call it there for tonight. I think that was a pretty good little troubleshooting session, and you got to see some of the work that was done this past week on the UI with and then of course the beginning of the city event system. It's really coming along. There's a ton of work that needs to be done on the UI still. I'm really not happy with how you manage the workers that get assigned to businesses. And that needs to change, and there just needs to be a much better job of displaying information to the player about whatever it is that they've decided to do in a given turn and the overall state of their city. If you have any questions in chat for me or any sort of commentary, anything you wanted to say, now is the time to shoot it out. I want to go ahead and try to close out the stream in a reasonable way, with my sugar-free soda, of course. I'm really glad the traveling I did this past week is over with. Um, that was brutal trying to record from that hotel because it was like a horrible internet connection, and the bit rate was just terrible, and I had tons of dropped frames and everything. And in fact, I just realized I forgot to update the video bitrate here in OBS, but I will remember for next time. At least in the meantime, we had a pretty stable connection this time, it looks like. Yeah, everything seems to be performing fairly well. So next week, what I'm hoping is that we will have a lot more of the UI completed. Maybe some 3D model progress, and maybe have one of these isometric graphics like totally done. That's really where I need to be right now. And then probably also one or two other city events thrown in as well. From here on out, it really needs to be a combination of polishing visuals and just tweaking the existing systems. Like at this point, the skeleton of everything that was described in the original game design doc is there. I have the player making decisions. I have the mechanic of the player trying to lure people to the town. I have businesses, and there are some other things that I imagined needed to be thrown in, but like I said, I need to weigh that against the other priorities in the project at this point. So I will leave it there. By the way, let me switch back to the main view here for just a second and get... oh my goodness, OBS is in the way. Do not forget, I am actually getting rid of this really soon, but using the discount code CALLKING, you can get 15% off Elega Corp merch. There are Kalling Kingdom t-shirts available. Let me go to Firefox and show you real quick. I tried to do this last week, but the hotel connection just died instantly. But here you go. Here's some Kalling Kingdom t-shirts. There's the farm concept art on there. Definitely will have more merch on the way for Kalling Kingdom. But if you would like to support the game, these are $20 a piece before shipping. And then, of course, you have the discount code, hopefully. And they are beautiful, beautiful shirts. Teespring always does really great work. They are available in a number of different kinds of colors. If you like the game, if you like what you're seeing, then please show it off. It would help a ton. I would really, really appreciate any aid that you provide here in the project. And, again, if you have any sort of feedback for me, please let me know. I want to involve you. I want to involve all of you in the process of building this thing. Because the release date will be here before you know it. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next week. Don't forget that the stream schedule is always here at elegacorp.com. I will be here next, not next week. We're skipping next week for July 4th, but the week after, on July 11th, I will be here at 7 p.m. CST, 8 p.m. EST. So see you guys then. Thanks so much. Have a good night.